The film opens as a team of criminals, led by Sig Gustafsson, robs a bank. Gustafsson breaks open a safety deposit box and grabs an I-team, known as a Plax. A little girl then walks into the building and confronts the robbers. She pulls off her mask to reveal herself as Detective Frank Drebin Jr. He proceeds to beat up the robbers in absurd ways while still wearing a Girl Scout outfit. Frank is a member of police squad like his late father, but he has gotten the department in trouble numerous times because of his tendency to go overboard with his tactics. As such, some of the robbers are suing him and the department for excessive force.
Thanks.
Frank and Captain Ed Hawken Jr. are told by Chief Davis to follow the rules and keep their body cams on. Frank and Ed then go to pay tribute to their dads, as do the other detectives. Except for Nordberg Jr. Frank hopes that his dad can give him a sign, like showing up in the form of an owl. Frank and Ed are called to a crime scene, where a man named Simon Davenport has crashed his car after driving off a cliff in a suspected suicide. Frank finds a matchbook with a tiger on it, while Ed mentions that Simon had a sister that lives nearby. The rest of the crew attempts to remove Simon's car with a crane, only for it to slip from the claw. Back at the station, Frank meets Simon's sister, Beth Davenport, and is instantly taken by her beauty. Beth fears that someone may have targeted her brother and does not believe he would have killed himself. She suggests that Simon's Weist boss, CEO Richard Kane of Edentech, might be involved. Frank agrees to follow up with her on the case when he learns anything. Frank attends an event hosted by Kane and Edentech. Kane gives Frank a tour and shows him the various inventions from his company, like using a machine to increase a man's sperm count. Kane is also dodgy about questions regarding Simon, but Frank recognizes the matchbook Kane uses has a tiger symbol similar to the one found in Simon's car. Kane says it's from a club he owns called Bengal. After Frank leaves, Kane orders Frank to be sent a gift, which is a smart car. Frank ends up accidentally using it to pull apart some charging stations and break a hole into the prison wall, inadvertently allowing some inmates to escape. Frank later joins Ed and Detective Barnes to interrogate one of the bank robbers. They review security footage, most of which is just Frank eating chili dogs, and then rushing to find a bathroom, to the point of drawing his gun and firing it so people let him through first. Eventually, they spot the bank robber in the video. He tells Frank that he was looking for the safety deposit box with the plot device inside. Ed then tells Frank that the deposit box belonged to Simon at Edentech. Kane leads a meeting of other evil billionaires as he discusses what the plot device is. It stands for Primordial Law of Toughness and can emit a frequency that causes everyone who hears it to become violent. Kane's plan is Project Inferno, which will have the billionaires retreat to a secret bunker while the rest of the world tears itself apart, and whoever is left alive can join their new world order. Also, Weird Al Yankovic will be part of their live entertainment.
That got me thinking.
Frank goes to the Bengal Club to dig up more dirt. He interrogates the bartender about Simon, confirming that he was at the bar recently. Frank spots Beth there and uses her as a distraction with Kane while he goes to look over security footage. After Nacy off a large number of henchmen, Beth sings a ridiculous scat song while Frank sneaks into the security room and finds the footage of Simon, who is meeting with a reporter named Douglas O'Reilly. Davis learns of Frank's activities and calls him to her home while she is in bed next to her sleeping husband. Because of his actions, she is suspending him for 2 weeks. Frank goes back to his apartment, where Beth is waiting for him. They start flirting and go ahead with having dinner. From a nearby rooftop, Gustafsson, who is working for Kane, spies on Frank and Beth through a thermal lens. Everything that they do is mistaken for sexual acts, especially when Frank's dog comes in and Gustafsson assumes they are doing things with the dog.
Okay. Wow.
Frank and Beth start to acknowledge their feelings for one another. They spend a romantic weekend together at a snowy cabin, where they perform a dark ritual that brings a snowman to life. They start to become a threesome until Frank only wants Beth. The snowman becomes murderous and tries to kill Frank and Beth until she decapitates it with a sword. Going back to the investigation, Frank visits O'Reilly's apartment, only to find very obvious clues that O'Reilly was murdered, and Frank is taking the easy bait to get himself framed. He finds O'Reilly's body and tries to dispose of the evidence, only to slice the man's head off with the ceiling fan. Police arrive, and Frank escapes in his smart car. Unfortunately, Kane hacks into the car and reveals his intention to kill Frank by driving him to his death. Frank breaks the windshield out to escape, only to run into a bunch of balloons and bees, followed by two guys carrying a replacement windshield that fits perfectly. Frank manages to get the virtual assistant, Frank Clippy Thiffity, to open the door, allowing him to jump out in time. Ed calls Frank to let him know that police squad is being shut down due to the investigation, and it is being turned into a spirit Halloween. Frank agrees to lay low and goes to Beth's home, where she treats his wound and seasons it like a chicken wing. He tells her about how Simon feared that the plot device was being used for evil purposes. And that's what got him killed. He suspects that Beth was only using him and pretending to love him. And then he goes on a rant about her using his TiVo and accidentally erasing episodes of Buffy. With help from his fellow detectives, Frank catches Gustafsson and puts him in a hospital bed. He tricks Gustafsson into thinking that Kane has been arrested and gets him to confess to Kane's plan, which is set to go off at midnight on New Year's Eve. This turns out to have been a Mission Impossible style trap with a fake room set up. But Barnes is also using it to get Frank to admit to coercing Gustafsson into confessing, since she works for internal affairs. When Frank gets her to admit that she threatened contractors to do what she wanted, then she gets arrested. Frank attends another event hosted by Kane, where he is set to activate the plot device. He finds that the frequency will be emitted from balls, set to drop at midnight. Frank gets inside the balls and loses his pants, exposing his ass to everyone. Meanwhile, Beth sneaks into the event to get revenge against Kane for Simon's murder. Her attempt fails and she is captured. Kane sees Frank's antics and goes to activate the device early after Frank fails to get everyone out of there. People everywhere on the streets start to go crazy and beat each other up. Frank fights off civilians by ejecting gun magazines at their faces before going after Kane. But his car isn't working. Frank then sees what appears to be Frank S.R. in the form of an owl who picks him up and flies him to catch up to Kane. Frank is briefly replaced by Dave Bautista to give a speech to Kane while the real Frank goes to the bathroom. And then the civilians start to attack Bautista. Frank and Kane prepare to fight to end things, but Kane gives up after Frank punches him in the belly. Kane attempts to escape with rocket gloves, only to crash headfirst into a lamppost. Beth arrives and still wants revenge, but Frank talks her out of it and convinces her to just use the device to turn everyone back to normal. Kane is arrested, and Frank and Beth resume their relationship. During the credits, Davis addresses reporters at a press conference after police squad is back and running. She tells them that Frank is under investigation, but he is really at a resort with Beth. The scene gets stuck in a friggin', but Frank and Beth are affected. After getting freaked out, they notice the fourth wall and the audience behind it. Frank then literally breaks the fourth wall with his fist.